Okay, so the novel Crime and Punishment, as I told you last time in my first lecture, really it's a huge novel and a very important novel. And really Dostoevsky was giving us so many really messages throughout, of course, the novel. Originally, of course, as I will tell you later on, originally the novel was a huge text concerning psychoanalysis, analytical criticism, and you know, a lot of social questions and social issues really were addressed. And as I told you last time, I was trying to find this film, but unfortunately, really, I couldn't find it. I don't know, it's dead or they took it away. I don't know where. But wherever you can find that film, really, it's an amazing, absolutely amazing film. The main actor, as I told you, was John Hurt, and I think it was, I don't know, somewhere around 1975 or so, or 1979, I think. Anyway, now in this novel, I will try to read some of this with you, as I told you about the power of translation and the excellent thing that we get in this novel. Now, I highlighted for you many stuff, and I think I sent you these highlighted, the highlighted version, correct? You have it, correct?
Yes, Doctor.
What do you mean? No? Huh?
Where did you send it, Doctor?
It's on Moodle. Come on. Really?
That.
Let me check. Let me quickly check.
We have it, Doctor. We have it.
On Moodle?
Yes.
You see, this is it. Because I made sure I have deleted the older version, and I kept let me quickly look. I kept this version because it has the highlighting in it, and I will show you that really, because I think you told me about it before, and I told you I will. So yeah, let me see. Yeah, it's there. It's the same. This is the same one. I have the highlighted one. Okay. So if you have the older one, you saved it somewhere. It's up to you. You can go through the two, of course. But yeah. So you can see here, I highlighted really, to me, the main key words and phrases and sections and ideas to see how much really this novel is a great text. Now, in chapter 1, you know, most of the novel, as you can see, is narrated by the first, by third person narrator. But to some extent, most of the novel was narrated to us, of course, through the third person narrator, through the voice of Raskolnikov himself, the way he speaks most of the time. But of course, originally, when Raskolnikov is speaking, of course, he would be speaking between inverted commas, which is like quoted narrative. So the narrator originally, as you can see here, from the very beginning, is a third person narrator telling us about Raskolnikov and the whole thing. Now, in this first section here, the word hesitation, I highlighted the word hesitation because this novel, yes, is full of this idea of hesitation, because Raskolnikov was always trying to convince himself to do the killing, to perform the killing, and to commit the crime of killing Alyona Ivanovna. And he was always hesitating, and there was a lot of carry on about it. And I think this is a main theme throughout this novel, which is hesitation. And yeah, the narrator showed us that. And I think also when you see the movie, if you see the film, you will see how much this was shown in a very, really amazing fashion. So here we can see the narrator again. On an exceptionally hot evening, early in July, a young man came out of the garret in which he lodged in St. Palace and walked slowly, as though in hesitation, towards K Bridge. Now, you can see, as I said, generally when you read a novel, you pay attention to the locale, to the place, to the antecedent, which we call it in fiction, really the antecedent or the introduction, to put us into the scene of the novel. And here you can see it's a hot day in summer, and we have a young man who's, and notice again, out of the garret, again, the word garret, it's like a small, funny, maybe room in which he lives. He called it a garret, really, which is to suggest that it is a very tiny, unusual kind of house or room. Of course, it's a rented room, really cheaply, absolutely cheaply rented room. He had successfully avoided meeting his landlady on the staircase. Again, we say, why avoiding meeting her? Of course, here you will start to question every sentence and every word we say. Why avoiding? Of course, we know later, of course. His garret was under the roof of a high 5-storied house and was more like a cupboard than a room. So notice here, again, the word garret, and it's a room, really. And again, the narrator is saying, what a funny room. It was a very tiny room. And again, he said, it's like a cupboard. It's not really a room, But it is a room, really, of course. It's a small room. So the narrator wanted to sort of exaggerate and to highlight the claustrophobic, really, the claustrophobia and the real agony and psychological agony and pain that this man is having. The landlady who provided him with garret, dinners and attendance lived on the floor below, and every time he went out, he was obliged to pass her kitchen, the door of which invariably stood open. And each time he passed, the young man had a sick, frightening feeling which made him scowl and feel ashamed. He was hopelessly in debt to his landlady and was afraid of meeting her. From the very beginning, I must warn you, because many students in the past, many of my students in the past, many of them, well, I don't know how many, but it could be more than quite a few of them, made the terrible mistake thinking that Raskolnikov killed his old lady, killed his landlady. No. Raskolnikov did not kill his landlady. His landlady, yes, she is tough with him because he didn't pay or he doesn't pay his rent. That's why. Whereas, on the contrary, his landlady is a very good woman. And she's really taking care of him, and she's giving him food and a lot of care and attention, really. And he would never kill her. He would never kill her because she's a nice, really old woman, poor old woman, and taking care of him. So because later on we shall see that he goes into a similar house and went up to Alyona Ivanovna on the 7th, I think in the 4th floor. Maybe some of the students mixed up or got this wrong to believe that it was his landlady. He killed his landlady. No, he killed another woman, another pawn broker, we shall see. She is to him a bad woman because she was using and abusing other people by pawning stuff and getting interests. And as I told you, she was right to have done this because she was doing what all the banks in the world actually were doing and maybe still doing today. So that's why he was always worried that he does not want her to see him because he can't pay the rent. That's why he was, as you can see, sick, frightening feeling because he was ashamed. Again, this indirectly tells us he's a nice man who feels responsible, who feels guilty that he can't pay his rent, because you can see here he's hopelessly in debt to her, of course. This was not because he was cowardly and abject. You see, again here, quickly the narrator is telling us, not because he was a coward man, not because he was, as you can see, he did this because he is, not a man. No, because he was really guilty in terms of his mind and spirit. He feels responsible and he feels ashamed that he can't pay. Quite the contrary, but for some time past, he had been in an overstrained, irritable condition, verging on hypochondria. Again, notice here when I say irritable, which is related to hesitation again. And this question of irritability again, being irritable all the time means he can easily be, irritated and feeling always on his edges. And as you can say, verging on hypochondria, nearly like being psychotic or being like a psychopath or being like a crazy man. Because hypochondria means, again, which is, I told you, which is similar to what I said about psychoanalysis or psychology or psychological diseases, similar to what I told you maybe about our friend Edgar Allan Poe's extreme sensitivity and, near schizophrenia. As I told you, something like close to being schizophrenia. So hypochondria, meaning as if he was always on his edges, he was always uneasy, he was always like being lost, he was always being unconscious, he was always being busy, and so on. So as if to see him like being in illness, if you like. He had become so completely absorbed in himself. Again, notice absorbed in himself and isolated. And I think here I highlighted the word isolated. Yes, isolation is a big theme throughout the novel. Isolation is a big theme throughout the novel. From the very beginning till the very end, poor Raskolnikov was absolutely miserably isolated, physically, emotionally, morally to some extent. He was isolated. You say, yeah, he has friends. Yeah, he was at the university. Yeah, he has his mother and sister sending him stuff from the village. Yeah. Yes. But in every respect, none of these people really knew what was going on inside him. So that's why the question of isolation was more psychological than physical. Even till the very end, when of course, when he met Sonia, and when later on, of course, very quickly at the beginning of this novel, later on, we shall see when he meets Marmeladov, or I would call him, Marmeladov. I don't know the French way. Sorry, the Russian pronunciation. I'm not sure, but the British or the English, they would say Marmeladov or Marmeladov or Marmeladov. I don't know. It's up to you the way you say it. Like marmalade, I don't know, but that's his name. When even he meets him, he becomes his friend. Both of them seem to be, isolated figures and trying to find friendship amongst themselves. I mean, amongst the two of them, which is again, very funny, strange. Well, not coincidence, but strange, really, match between Marmeladov and Raskolnikov. The way both of them, each one of them has his own funny, amazing trouble and psychological trouble and disease, blah, 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 blah. Later on, of course, these terrible things led Marmeladov to, to death, because later on we shall see what is his problem. And I think I said that to you before, and I think I will come back to this idea many, many times. And really, originally, Marmeladov, really, or Marmeladov, or I don't know, it's up to you. Again and again, I say that. Even Dostoevsky wanted Marmeladov to be his hero, not Raskolnikov. Really, he wanted to call even the novel as Marmeladov, really, because he was, or he is, such an important figure in the novel. And funny enough, yes, he was killed early in the novel, but the main things, of course, later on, as I said, Dostoevsky changed his mind and made Raskolnikov the hero of the novel, because he focused more on him. But originally, really, many people, many critics, many scholars even thought that he would have called his novel Marmeladov instead of Crime and Punishment. In fact, later on, I will ask you another question similar to this, but wait for me, I will say that to you later. So you can see here the question of isolation. Think about it, because all the time we see this is the question of the isolation of the Western world. Throughout the Western world, I think in the late 19th century, remember, this is a novel written in 1865, and I think this is, 1865, correct? Let me see. Oh, 66, 1866. Yeah. So really, yes, you could say, well, the middle of the 19th century. Why do you say 20th century? Yeah, because really the question of isolation became more and more radical in the 20th century. And I will come back and tell you again other thing, going back even in this idea. I will stretch it back even to back in history, to go back to Shakespeare's time. Later on, I will mention this to you many times later. So the question here is strongly clear from the isolation from his fellows that he dreaded meeting. So he notes the word dreaded. He does not want, he is terrified to even meet anybody. Not because he's guilty of anything, not because he's weak, not because he's coward, but he's busy. His mind is preoccupied. Not only his landlady, but anyone at all. You see, so this is what I mean. He was crushed by poverty. Yeah. Look at this, look at the verb. I think here the narrator is an amazing, I should say the translator, really. The translator. I don't know. I don't know Russian. I don't think I will ever learn Russian. It's too late for me to learn Russian now. But I would be very interested to see the translation or the origin in Russian, to see, the word here, crushed by poverty. So it's a very strong verb to say here, when you are somebody, when you are absolutely poor and miserably poor. But the anxieties of his position had of late ceased to weigh upon him. He had given up attending the matters of practical importance. He had lost all desire to do so. Nothing that any landlady could do had a real terror for him. So here the narrator is coming back to say to us, this man is out of this world. Nobody can frighten him. No landlady will terrify him. No, it's not that. He is busy in something completely, absolutely different. And that's why we say that nobody, no landlady, no one can terrify him or can, frighten him. But to be stopped on the stairs, to be forced to listen to her trivial, irrelevant gossip, or pestering demands for payment, threats and complaints, and to rack his brains for excuses, to prevaricate, to lie. No, rather than that, he would creep down the stairs like a cat and slip out unseen. I think this is too much for the narrator to use this. So, as if to say, he has no time whatsoever to talk to anybody or to listen to his landlady to gossip and say and complain and blah, 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 blah. He said, I would rather steal myself down and creep, notice the word creep down, as if stealthily stealing himself down by not letting anybody to see him. Because he does, again, notice, like a cat. I think this is too much to say. I don't know if our friend, the real man, I must check this, at least this first section. I feel sorry that I don't know Russian, but I will ask somebody about it. This evening, however, on coming out into the street, he became acutely aware of his fears. So you see, again, here we say fears. You say, what? Why? What is wrong with him? So notice here the idea that the narrator is preparing us to see the mentality of this man. I want to attempt a thing like that, and I'm frightened of these trifles, he thought, with an odd smile. Yes, all is in a man's hands, and he lets it all slip from cowardice. That's an axiom. It would be interesting to know what it is men are most afraid of. Taking a new step, uttering a new word is what they fear most. But I'm talking too much. It's because I chatter than I do nothing. Or perhaps it is that I chatter because I do nothing. I've learned to chatter this last month, lying for days together in my den thinking. What is he talking about? So here, notice what he said. I want to attempt a thing like that. Zainab? Zainab? Hello? Hello? Hello, boys, girls?
Yes, sir.
Are you there?
Yes, with you.
Yes, doctor, we are here.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. What is this? What is this way saying that? What's this? Why underlined here? Notice. Like, what does he mean? I want to attempt a thing like that.
Maybe he means committing the crime that he's thinking of.
Yeah. So notice from the very first moment we see him, he's thinking about killing the old lady. So immediately we are told, we are exposed here to the narrative saying that here we have a man who's thinking of committing a crime, and he was blaming himself as if he is absolutely a coward or someone who can't take action, and who is, again, he said, he thought. So the word thought here is a very important, really, narrative ploy, is a very important narrative ploy, narrative strategy. Most of the novel is really in his mind, is thinking in his mind. Nothing is said. He's saying all this to himself. It's his mind which is saying this. So he's speaking to himself all the time, and of course to us here. It's like in a monologue. It's like really in a monologue, or what we call it interior dialogue, telling us, explaining to us what he thinks and what he feels. And most of the novel, a lot of the novel, the strongest parts of the novel is done through this thought, thinking and meditating and dreaming. He had so many dreams, and I will show you this, later on. We'll talk about his dreams, So the word thought is interesting and is a key word here. When again he said odd smile, he was mocking himself, smiling and mocking himself. Am I able to do this? I'm frightened to see my landlady. I'm terrified to see my landlady because I'm guilty, because I can't pay my debts, and yet I'm going to kill an old woman. Am I right? Am I going to really be able to do that? And that's why, so he's really mocking himself, saying, yeah. Again, he said, notice here, man's hands, as if to say, I have everything in my hands, but yet I'm a coward. I can't do it. And he said, well, this is something interesting. You have all the power, but yet you can't do. What a terrible, notice here the word axiom, or something like a very funny saying, or like a contradictory saying. And that's why he goes on to say, it would be interesting to know what it is men are most afraid of taking, afraid of. So he's blaming, he started immediately the novel by blaming himself of unable to take action. So we go back to the first word in the novel, hesitation. Hesitation. So this is the first example we see here telling us that he can't take action. He can't take action. Taking a new step, uttering a new word is what they fear most. As if to say, that's the problem. We people, we think we can do, we etc. But we are cowards. We can't. But I'm talking too much. You see, this is it again. He is blaming himself more and more. He's saying, I'm only gossiping. I'm only chattering and saying, saying a lot of things and doing nothing. I chatter that I do nothing. Or perhaps it is that I chatter because I do nothing. I've learned to chatter this last month, lying for days together in my den, thinking. Again, using the word den, tiny room, thinking all the time of Jack and Giant Killer. He's using here about, borrowing names and ideas about killers. Why am I going there now? Going there where? So here, this is really part of the rehearsal. He's rehearsing his action. Going there where? He's going to Alyona. He's going to train himself and to rehearse, like what we have seen, for example, in the King's Elephant, the rehearsal. So he's rehearsing, going to Alyona to see how she would meet him and how he can do it. Am I capable of that? That, again here, that, means the killing. Is that serious? Am I going to do it? It is not serious at all. It's simply a fantasy to amuse myself, a plaything. Yes, maybe it is a plaything. But is it a plaything? No. No. And it's not a fantasy, because he was really thinking about it, completely aware of it. And he was doing his terrible, if you like, deed, of course, later on by killing the old lady and her sister, of course, her sister by pure chance. So notice from the very first moment, we get the idea from the first page, as you can see. The narrator is telling us, preparing us, and we see Raskolnikov thinking that he's going to, kill this old lady. The heat in the street was terrible, and the airlessness, the bustle and the bluster, scaffolding, bricks and dust all about him. And that special Pittsburgh stench, so familiar to all who are unable to get out of town in summer. And really here, the narrator really gives us a lovely image of the town, of the city. Again, the way he's describing the city, airless. Again, this is what I said, claustrophobia, or feeling as if somebody is strangling you. This is what we use the word phobia or claustrophobia, or like being imprisoned. And this is again to go back to the question of isolation and imprisonment. It's something like that. And here again, the word nerves, the question about nerves, that everything is being, to him, getting him really painfully nervous all the time, and so on. And the narrator again, tells us more and more about the city itself. Notice stench. The word stench means the whole town is smelling horrible, which are particularly numerous in that part of the town, and the drunken men whom he met continually, although it was a working day, completely the revolting misery of the picture. Again here, the word really, which is another key word in this novel, which is drunken. Drunken. Really, I will come back to this point later on, but remember, we shall see that Marmeladov really died as a result of his terrible addiction to alcohol. And all his misery and all his position was his function, his terrible position in the novel is being a drunkard, is being really alcoholic. And the way this led to disasters, really the disaster, the biggest disaster is, of course, allowing or letting or making or forcing his own daughter, Sonia, into prostitution, which is horrible, absolutely ugly and horrible. To have done this to your own daughter. And also, of course, to his other kids, other children, you know, to his second wife. So the idea really is quite amazing. Later on, we shall see that dramatically shown. So he's saying that the whole city seems to be full of, again, the images we see in the film, I think they are absolutely lovely. The way it's done, that film was fantastic. So here you can see the idea and the disgust. Again, you can see the word disgusting, revolting, and again using the word disgust, and so on. An expression of profoundest disgust gleamed for a moment at the young man's refined face. He was, by the way, exceptionally handsome, above the average in height, slim, well-built, with beautiful dark eyes and dark brown hair. Soon he sank into deep thought, or more accurately speaking, more completely, blankness of mind. Blankness of mind. Again, here we come back to the idea of, you know, of complete preoccupation, as if his mind is absolutely busy, but we don't know exactly what is inside there to make him so much always busy. So the question here, we say blankness of mind, is ironical, really. It's not blank, it's not empty. His mind is not empty. But, you know, the idea really here to say that he was always, you know, as if to say he was carrying all the pain of the world over his shoulders, as we may say, like, you know, in our language, for example. He walked along, not observing what he was about him and not caring to observe it. From time to time, he would mutter something from the habit of talking to himself. What? Talking to himself? Yeah. Yeah, we do that. We talk to ourselves when we are alone, when you are really always alone, you know, and you get crazy about being alone. And if you are really having problems, you talk to yourself. Yeah. So here, Raskolnikov, I think in the narration here means, you know, he's getting really on the verge of being crazy. So the idea, notice here, talking to himself, and again to say, as if this talk is something like what he said to us before, and he was laughing and blaming himself as being inactive, and he can't take action, he can't do something. And as if to say, it's like here the word confessed, confessed, which is confession. Because yes, the whole novel, later on we shall say, it's something like a psychological confession. It is a psychological confession. And he confessed only and really made Sonia the only person to whom he confessed, and the only person to whom he well, later really respected and made him think and really changed him, totally changed him, is Sonia. Sonia, who, of course, we said, who herself was terribly abused by society into turning her into a prostitute because of her father's terrible action and deeds and so on. So the question of confession, again, here supports our idea about psychoanalysis, because when you have problem, when you have really something, the first thing you say, talk about it, tell me, talk about it. And he kept this, terrible thing in his mind a lot of time, until finally he decided to tell Sonia, and he told her. And finally she convinced him, of course, as we know, convinced him to go and tell the police, and so on. So the question of confession, it's to do, again, later on, you might say, is this something to do with his own religious, if you like, resurrection? Is he being resurrected again into being a Christian? Because originally he was never a believer. And again, are we saying here that our friend Dostoevsky really, or I say Dostoevsky, people say Dostoevsky, I don't know. I mean, I say it the way I say it, or the way the English way would say it, but never mind. Really, Dostoevsky is talking about that in many ways. Is he talking about Christian values in that, when especially embodied throughout his relationship to Sonia, especially in the last chapter in the novel, the epilogue. If I show you here, the epilogue here, the last chapter here, it's called epilogue. Well, 2 sections actually. Yeah, the epilogue, and you may say, what's this epilogue? It's like a conclusion, or like an appendix. It's like an appendix. Why the writer is giving us an appendix, as if to say he is giving us a conclusion about what happened. Now, of course, in those of you really who wanted really to read the whole novel and to finish it, really this last epilogue is an important thing. Some people think that this is added later on. Originally Dostoevsky did not write this originally, and then people say, critics, I'm not sure, I don't know, but we have it here as an epilogue, like a conclusion, which is like prologue and epilogue. It's like a conclusion to his story, and I think it explains some of the concluding elements about what happened, and like in a summary, or summarizing the whole thing really here in this, about as you can see, about 10 pages really, because 10 pages, nearly 9 pages. So we see here about the question of how he went. Notice how it happened, he didn't know, but all at once something seemed to seize him and fling him at her feet. He wept and threw his arms round her knees. This is the last moment, if you like, of conversion, of changing. Why to fall down on Sonia's feet, on Sonia's knees? Why? As if to say, why are you doing this to you know. I think the writer really here, Dostoevsky, is giving us amazing questions to think about. For the first instant, she was terrified or terribly frightened, and she turned pale. She jumped up and looked at him, trembling. But at the same moment, she understood, and a light of infinite happiness came into her eyes. She knew and had no doubt that he loved her beyond everything, and that at last the moment had come. They wanted to speak, but could not. Tears stood in their eyes. They were both pale and thin. But those sick, pale faces were bright with the dawn of a new future, of a full resurrection into a new life. Oh. This is it. Resurrection. This is the word I said. The Christian resurrection. They were renewed by love. The heart of each held infinite sources of life for the heart of the other. They resolved to wait and be patient. They had another 7 years to wait. And what terrible suffering and what infinite happiness before them. But he had risen again, and he knew it and felt it in all his being, while she only lived in his life. She only lived in his life. You know, this is a nice, I read this to you here, I highlighted that, and this is the end of the novel, this is the end of this. And I think this is a lovely conclusion. Of course, I'm saying it here to you quickly to understand how much really the writer, he really he thinks great of her, of Sonia's role. So notice here when we say confessed, that's why I'm saying here the word confessed, and the question of, you know, absolute consciousness. Later on, we shall see that a lot. So in the next, paragraph here, you can see again the way the narrator is describing the way he's dressed, and the way he looks, and the because remember, as I said, he's a very, very poor man. You know, he comes from a very poor family, you know, and so here again we see the Marxist socialist, really strong ideological questions about socialism and the correction of society and so on. So this is a novel about the absolute rejection of what society was under the feudal system, under the terrible feudal system. Okay, and you can see there, as you can see, the question of the bitterness, he said. Notice the bitterness and contempt. Well, contempt for the social system in which he and not he only, but the whole of society. And that's why, you know, the idea is, I think, is explained here in a very nice way. Look at the last sentence. Not shame, however, but quite another thing, quite another feeling akin to terror had overtaken him. So he was not ashamed of all of what he is or how he looks or whatever. He's absolutely fine about it. He is not ashamed of his poverty or anything. No. He's not ashamed of that. And really, poor people should not be ashamed of the way they look. They should not. They should not. They can better themselves, yeah. They can work hard, yes. They can get education, yes. They can become better people, yes. But you should never be ashamed of yourself, whoever you are, whatever you are, no matter what, no matter what, unless as you are a decent person. Poverty is ugly, is bad, etc., etc. But we should never be ashamed of our life the way we are. So that's why he's saying here, no shame. But he said he had a certain terrible terror inside him. I knew it, he muttered in confusion. I knew it, I thought so. That's the worst of all. Why a stupid thing like this? The most trivial detail might spoil the whole plan. Yes, my hat is too noticeable. It looks absurd, and that makes it noticeable. With my rags, I thought I ought to wear a cap, any sort of old pancake. Again, I think he's, the funny thing is using wearing a pancake, a cap or a pancake. I think this is nice, but not this grotesque thing, because he was wearing this, cowboy, like these high-class cowboy hats sometimes. These like similar, or these rich people hats. And then he said, oh, this doesn't suit the way I look. I should throw it away and wear a different thing, a cap, which is a normal kind, like a poor sort of looking thing. So really he was mocking himself about how he is dressed up and how he should appear. Again, it seems they say, so he knows what he's talking about. He knows exactly what he's saying. What matters is that people would remember it, and that would give them a clue. For this business, one should be as little conspicuous as possible. What business? For this business, of course, he means killing and committing a crime is an important thing. And if you are wearing a hat like this, people will say, yeah, we saw a man with a hat, and I will be able to be found out. I will be spotted quickly. So that's why, he's worried about that. So that's what it means here. Conspicuous, meaning people will doubt me. Trifles are what matter. Why? It's just such trifles that always ruin everything. Yeah, girls, do you remember that story called Trifles?
Yes, doctor, we remember.
Yeah, I mentioned this to you before, but again, have you studied that maybe? Some of you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, notice here he's saying exactly what that play is. Because people think this is trivial matter, but trifles, he said, trifles are not trifles. People think that trifles are just trifles, but really they are not. He's saying here that what really matters a lot, and what really tells the truth a lot, he's saying is this, he's saying is actually the trifle itself, or these trifles themselves. And of course, meaning the way he looks and the way he dressed and the way he has his hat and so on. So he's saying, yeah, sometimes these trivial things will damage, will destroy everything. So the idea, again, we see here, he's always thinking and thinking and thinking. Again, in the next section here, the narrator said this. Notice here, I mentioned to you monologues. Notice here, daring, and strong, really, monologues about what he is thinking. And I think the word here is mentioned there, notice. Now, a month later, he had begun to look upon them differently. And in spite of the monologues in which he jeered at his own impotence and indecision. Impotence and indecision. Again, this is to do with hesitation and, inaction. If I ask you, I always do this and I tell you in the exam to give evidence from the text. These are, for example, are examples of evidence, signs of evidence that Raskolnikov really always suffered from what we call inaction or indecision or impotence or hesitation. Or, later on I will tell you this, it is really the Hamlet question. Hamlet question, which is, to be or not to be, and the whole idea of Hamlet syndrome, because Raskolnikov was exactly like Hamlet. You know Hamlet?
Yes, we're
Yes,
taking.
Doctor.
Sorry?
Yes, we know him.
Yeah, I mean, have you studied that?
We have a course of Shakespeare
Yes, we
now.
are studying it now.
Oh, really? Wow, that's good. That's good. Who's doing this?
I am doing this.
Me too.
I'm saying, who's teaching this Hamlet for you now?
Dr. Krista.
Yeah. Did she show you any film about it, or she told you about any film?
Yes,
we saw
yeah.
Which one? An old
The
one or
one
new
by
one?
Mel Gibson.
Oh no, I don't like Mel Gibson. No. Go back to Laurence Olivier. I gave you the one I put for you in Moodle. I put that for you on Moodle myself here in this course. Have you noticed that? I said Hamlet. Watch that, is lovely. It's Laurence Olivier, the best actor ever, the best English actor ever, and the best Hollywood actor ever. Nobody really. Laurence Olivier, he was that Englishman. He was an amazing actor. Laurence Olivier and Vivian Leigh in that lovely, absolutely. It was black and white film, by the way, and it was made years ago, actually 1948. But it's an amazing film in Hollywood. When Laurence Olivier was a young man, still really a very strong young actor. So he played Hamlet in that film. I think it's a lovely, absolutely lovely play. I taught this many times to my students, and it's a great play. So Hamlet, good that now you know. I don't know if it's all of you are doing it, but those of you who are doing it, I think it's a lovely comparison here between Hamlet and Raskolnikov. And I think this idea of hesitation and impotence and indecision, because that was the situation with Hamlet all the time. He doesn't know whether he wants to make sure that his uncle was the real killer of his father, because he was worried that the ghost may not be truthful, or maybe the ghost was not his father. So he was worried that he wants to make sure that his father was, or his uncle was, the real criminal, so he would punish him. But it was too late. He discovered it only in the last minute when it was too late after himself being touched by the poisoned sword. Maybe later on, I don't want to spoil your reading of the play. Have you finished it, by the way, or still in that play now?
Still, doctor.
We
didn't
are
finish.
still.
Yeah. Okay, good. So really, this is, I'm saying here, this always, that's his main tragedy. That's his main flaw, as we call the tragic flaw. The main problem with Hamlet is his indecision. Or when he would say, sometimes he said like his impotence, you know, unable to take action. And, you know, he said at the end of the day, notice, he had involuntarily come to regard this hideous dream as an exploit to be attempted, although he still did not realize this himself. He was positively going now for a rehearsal of his project. You know, this is the word we said, rehearsal. So this is Zachariah and his men rehearsing. So Raskolnikov was going on and on and on, because he went 2-3 times to the old lady to see how he's going to kill her. You know, to study the whole circumstances, if you like. Again, this is his project, the project of killing her. And notice the idea of project. What kind of project is this? What is he going to gain out of this project? Normally, projects should be positive. We gain something from projects. But to call a killing a project is something really here ironical and funny and really paradoxical, absolutely paradoxical and ironical. Every step, his excitement grew more and more violent. Again, he goes on to say to us about the question, notice, nervous tremor. You know, always, as if to say he was always nervous again. And in the next few lines, really, I can't, you know, as I said, I really can't read everything for you, but please read all those, everything as I highlighted that for you, really. Please read it all. Read it all, please, because it's a lovely text, amazingly lovely text. So the question here again to go about isolation and darkness, and the question of heart of darkness and the misery of darkness, to go back to 20th century early ideas about darkness and something like that. I think it is mentioned here in many ways by the narrator. If I am so scared now, what would it be if it somehow came to pass that I were really going to do it? He could not help asking himself. Again, asking himself, monologuing, again, dialoguing within himself. So he's saying, if I'm now scared, look at me now, I'm terrified. What's going to happen to me later when I do it? Notice, what would it be if it somehow came to pass? As if to say, maybe I will be able to do it. And that's why when he's saying, if it came to pass, if I managed to kill her, he could not help asking himself as he reached the fourth story. You know, story here really means the floor, like first floor, second floors. So the old lady is living there. The pawnbroker, the woman he wants to kill. There, his progress was barred by some porters who were engaged in moving furniture out of a flat He knew that the flat had been occupied by a German clerk in the civil service and his family. This German was moving out then, and so the fourth floor on this staircase would be untenanted except by the old woman. So now he's studying the idea that the whole floor will be empty except her house, her flat. That's a good thing anyway, he said. You know, this is what he thought to himself. And he rang the bell of the old woman's flat. The bell gave a faint tinkle as though it were made of tin and not of copper. The little flats in such houses always have bells that ring like that. He had forgotten the note of that bell, and now its peculiar tinkle seemed to remind him of something and to bring it clearly before him. He started, you know, here we say started means he was shaken, he was nervous. He started, he was sort of shocked. His nerves were terribly overstrained by now. In a little while, the door was opened a tiny crack. The old woman eyed her visitor with evident distrust through the crack. Notice the narrator, of course, all this is narrated to us by the narrator, okay? So the old woman here looked at him, but look again, the verb eyed her visitor, eyed him, you know? So looking not as if she does not trust him. Again, glittering in the darkness. But seeing a number of people on the landing, she grew bolder and opened the door wide. The young man stepped into the dark entry. Look how many times the word dark and darkness and black and darkness and isolation is mentioned everywhere in the story, in the novel, I should say. Which was partitioned off from the tiny kitchen. The old woman stood facing him in silence and looking inquiringly at him. He was a diminutive, withered up she was a diminutive, withered up old woman of 60, with sharp, malignant eyes and a sharp little nose. Her colorless, somewhat grizzled hair was thickly smeared with oil, and she wore no kerchief over it. Round her thin, long neck, which looked like a hen's leg. What a funny description. To describe her neck like a hen's leg, was knotted some sort of flannel rag. And in spite of the heat, there hung flapping on her shoulders a mangy fur cap or cape. And, you know, the description really here shows how funny this old woman is. And here we find the first time Raskolnikov speaking to her.
Doctor,
Please, lady. Yeah?
I'm sorry for interrupting, but I need to know something.
Yes.
So, like, he is planning to kill somebody, but he never met that person. Why he is thinking of killing that? Like, any person he met, he will kill him?
Oh, no. The novel started like that, but he knew the lady. He knew her before, and he came to her before. But the novel does not tell us these details.
Yeah,
the novel starts here by the time when he was practicing to go to her. This is not a sudden thing deciding to, he was thinking before the beginning of the novel, of course. So the novel starts here. But the idea was in his mind, and he knew the lady, he was planning it, he was thinking about it for many times. Yeah.
Yeah, got you, doctor.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I think I'll stop the record.